I'm thinking this is normal.
Oh, gosh.
I know. I know.
Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. We have several items on the agenda.
Okay.
So good morning, everyone. I'm Jessica Sandgren, Mayor Pro Tem for the City of Thornton and the 2021 Chair for NATA. We also have, we'll give Anita a minute when she comes back, but our Vice Chair, Joan, oh, there she is, Joan Peck, and then Anita Seiss is our treasurer this year. And
Katie is now ready for school. Sorry, guys.
You never know with these weird mornings that we're all living in. So with that, this is our first meeting for 2021. We have a lot of items to work on this year. It feels like we've sort of been off on not really a vacation because things have still been happening. I know we've all been on a million Zoom meetings, but I'm really looking forward to getting going again with our NATA agenda and items that we're all looking forward to working on this year. So it's a welcome back for some of you. Lynn Baca is back with us as a county commissioner now, I see, and she's been a part of NATA for a long time. So I know she'll be a great addition. And I'm sorry, I don't know who else is on here that might be new if I miss you, but welcome and look forward to working with everyone this year. So Karen, anything else before we move on just to the approval of minutes?
I think you've covered it. I might just mention that Deborah Johnson, General Manager of RTD, I saw that she is on our call as well. So welcome, Deborah.
Thanks for being here, Deborah. All right, well, with that, let's go ahead and move on to the approval of the December 2020 NATA meeting minutes. Any questions on those or changes that anyone saw? I don't see any hands. Can I get a motion for approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Second,
That was
Malcolm.
Joyce and, okay. Thank you. And hopefully everyone has had a chance to review the budget, or I guess we'll review it now.
There we go.
Perfect. And so was this sent out to everybody previously?
It hasn't been sent out to everybody other than the SPC. And I think the dues, membership dues are going out or have gone out this week or will be going out to the jurisdictions. So I'll just walk you through it. The balance left from last year is $17,945. And then we expect in dues 28,000. That would give us 46,025. Administrative costs, and then membership and Smart Commute. And I'm sorry, my screen is blocking the slide. Maybe you could see that. There we go. Administrative cost 24,300. And NATA 12,500, and then NATA membership and Smart Commute 12,500. That leaves an unobligated 9,225.54. I think we talked about this before. It's not a significant unused balance, but should we want to do something more than have just staff work on things, if we wanted to hire a consultant or an analyst or any of those kinds of things, we anticipated asking each of the communities to put some money into it if that's the move we make.
And so that was a conversation that we started last year in 2020 at the SPC. And so because we didn't really get a chance to do any of that with the COVID, we'll just look at that again this year and have that conversation pretty early, I think. I don't think that's on the agenda for today, but I know we will get to that. Any questions about the budget? I don't see any hands. All right, can I get a motion to approve the 2021 NATA budget?
So moved.
Second.
Like that was Joyce and Anita.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to the approval of the 2021 SPC members.
We'll just reiterate that the SPC is really the agenda setting committee that meets the Friday before the NATA meeting. We have in the bylaws that it's the past chair, the new chair, the vice chair, the treasurer, and then 2 other seats. And generally we look for members to be in communities that aren't represented in the executive committee. The SPC met last week and have recommended that Malcolm Fleming from Erie have a seat on SPC and Brent Sutherline from Commerce City have a seat on SPC. And that would round out our SPC committee. However, SPC meetings are always open to any member of NATA to attend. And if you want the meeting notices for SPC, let us know. We'll add you to the list. Many staff people attend SPC, so it's open to anyone.
Thank you, Karen. Anybody have questions or comments about adding Malcolm and Brent to the SPC seats? It's nice to have Commerce City at the table. I think with all the items that we're going to be working on, it's going to be an important addition. All right, we'll go ahead and take a motion to approve that.
So moved.
Second.
And there's the schedule for this, looks like through October for the SPC.
I'll send that out again, and I'll send the updated representative and senior staff list if you haven't already gotten the last 3 that I've sent you and made changes to. So I'll send those out again to everyone.
Perfect. And that's again the Friday before we meet for NATA, and that's at 8 a.m. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward to the Smart Commute 2020 highlights and accomplishments.
We've just got a few slides to show you, and we had a retreat yesterday for the Smart Commute board, and it was a very successful working retreat. And we're going to turn this over now to Carson to go over the highlights for Smart Commute.
Sure, thanks, Karen. I'm going to keep it brief here. You can see on the slide, we were very busy in 2020. We'd just like to highlight some of the things we accomplished. I'll hit on a few of these that I think are the highest points. The 8th annual Transforum that I'm sure most of you guys attended, we thought was a great success considering it was held virtually and we had great international speakers and talked about the inline opening. Speaking of the inline, we had the water bottles that we provided for grand opening, and our very own Tammy helped make an inline coffee table pictorial book that I'm sure most of you have gotten a copy of. We conducted our annual survey this year with over 1,000 responses. Even though companies weren't working, we saw a high teleworking rate, and it was nice to get some data validity around that. The Flex Ride service celebrated 1 year and continues success in that area. Our staff attended 38 webinars throughout the year that were international and national webinars, including things like TRB, Sustainability and Emerging Mobility Technology Conference. Karen was appointed to the position of CDOT TC Chair in 2020. I was able to join the Rocky Mountain Act Board and the Advanced Mobility Partnership. Tammy from our staff was selected to serve on the CO7 TAC. And Catherine Sanders from our staff passed the very first ever Transportation Demand Management Certification exam. These are some slides highlighting some of our numbers from the year. These are great infographics. On the left, you see the Flex Ride numbers. So our program manager spent 78 hours riding alongside RTD customers. She worked on 6 specific tweaks for that service to help with the ridership. There were only over 490 customer service calls handled during the last year, over 24 hours a day, handling those to make sure people can get on the bus, with 11 customized travel training trips. We were able to hold 32 mobility fairs throughout the year in person, reaching over 900 users, some early and some even late as we got into COVID season. During the summer, we had the opportunity to work with Dr. Mack on the free Uber ride program, able to give away 855 Uber rides through that program and $420 worth of bus passes for people to try out the bus. Our team spent over 1,450 hours advocating for transportation in 2020. which included things like 12 specific teleworking consultations and 26 employer meetings, with about 150 employers served, which represents about 28,000 employees in the entire North Metro area. Speaking of the North Metro area, there are about 720,000 people who live here. As we all know, it is growing, and 260,000 cars use the I-25 North Corridor every single day. Those are our main constituents for Smart Commute. In 2020, our Karen Stewart, I don't know how she has time to do anything else, but she spent over 800 hours advocating for transportation. When we went back through her calendar that last year, one of her quotes from the year was, "The words of wisdom I wanted to give you today is that small projects can have a big impact." When she was talking about the Flex Ride, I think it's important for us to all realize that as we went through a time of COVID, those small projects can have a huge impact on people's lives. Speaking of COVID, we leaned into social media and our online presence a little bit. We had over 300 posts to our social media, 26 YouTube videos, including 5 tips videos and other board meeting videos that had over 40 hours of watch time and 500 cumulative views on our page. Over 9,000 visits were made to the Smart Commute website, of which we spent $0 to pay for ads to bring people there. A real kicker for us was the number at the bottom, $602,000. That's the total revenue on average for a transportation management organization in the Denver metro area. Our sister organizations, Smart Commute operates on about $253,000. So we'd like to think we do a pretty good job bang for the buck wise. I mentioned these two before, or at least Catherine and I did. She passed one of the very first TDM CP exam, which was 15 individuals nationally and 54 internationally to pass that first round of testing. So we're really proud of her for that. And Karen Stewart, our very own, was recognized as the 2020 W2S Colorado Woman of the Year. Her selection for the award nominates her for the International Woman of the Year. So big congrats to her for that. Here's a list of our 2021 board and officers. We have people from the public and the private sector that come together to impact our board. And here's our 2021 work plan. So we just met yesterday to talk about this. We're going to focus in on things like the greenhouse gas roadmap and how we can help with that, with things that we can offer like carbon footprint analysis for businesses, resource information on charging stations, and leaning into the regional ETRP effort being held by the RAC. The regional bike network, we'd like to work on something that shows the connectivity across the region, that addresses first and last mile solutions, and is able to recommend some best practices as we try to bridge those connectivity gaps in our region along bike networks. We're going to try to help with Transportation 101 videos, which is something that NATA is doing, as well as Smart Commute. And we'd like to hold a series of webinars that focus on different topics such as mobility, micromobility, greenhouse gases, bring in expert speakers and talk about those things throughout 2021. Madam Chair, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. Well, a lot was accomplished last year. And again, it feels like we were all sort of at home not doing anything, but clearly that's not true. And so I think we saw in the chat also, congratulations to Karen and congratulations to Catherine. Really job well done. Okay, so we have, moving on, we have next the NATA 2020 accomplishments.
Thanks, and I'll take this one over. Every year we go through the year and we do a lot of things, and at the end of the year we look to see what we spent our time and efforts on, and we want to give a list here to you of some of the efforts that NATA had last year. You know, starting early in the year last year, as RTD was looking for an interim general manager, NATA sent a letter to Chair Angie Riviere-Malpiatti to give comments on what kind of qualities we'd like to see in an interim general manager. And that was in January of last year. In April, we sent a letter to the Secretary of Transportation supporting Longmont's 2020 Build Grant application. And this is something that we use our master projects list. If a project is on that list, NATA writes letters in support of those projects, or we take them up at a NATA meeting and give a thumbs up to do support for those. So we sent that support letter. In June, we sent a letter to Paul Ballard, who was chosen as the interim general manager. And at that time, there was quite a lot of consternation over the Fast Tracks Internal Savings Account, FISA, as we all lovingly call it. When there was discussion at the RTD board level about either wiping out the FISA to balance their budget or reducing money into the FISA account in the future. The original purpose of FISA was really to bring internal resources into an account so we could use that, the districts in the RTD catchment area, for planning, design, and construction of unfinished fast tracks projects. And you know, there's several of those. One is the N line and the Northwest line and Central line. And without a pool of money available, opportunities are lost. And so we felt very strongly about supporting the commitment to retain those fast tracks internal savings account fund. That same day, we wrote a letter to Francis Bourne, the Federal Rail Administration, in support of a CRISI grant. I think this one came from Commerce City, and it was for Colorado US 85 112th Avenue Interchange Project. Then in July, we sent a letter to Senator Faith Winter and Representative Matt Gray with our nominations of Julie Mullica and Anita Seitz to the RTD Accountability Committee, local governments representatives. And just at the very end of the year, Chair Mullica sent a letter on behalf of NATA to Senator Faith Winter and Representative Matt Gray with some input on their proposed 2021 transportation legislation that they came and spoke to us on at our December NATA meeting. Next slide, please. We wanted to talk about the presentations that we had. Now, you know that we had several months in 2020 when we didn't meet. Initially, as COVID hit, we didn't have 2 meetings, and then one later in the year. But when we did have meetings, we had quite a number of great presentations. The January meeting, we had a CDOT presentation on I-25 segment 3 from 120th to Colorado 7. We had the NATA retreat in February. We welcomed General Manager Paul Ballard and listened to his commitment to RTD and to the region. What was interesting was in that meeting in February, he made the commitment, they would open the N line in 2020, and by golly, they did. They opened it in September, and that was really significant for us in February to hear that from Paul Ballard, that he was going to make sure that our line was open. And some of us looked at it a little skeptically, but sure enough, it happened. In May, we had Bo Martinez come and talk to us about the consolidation of the Adams County Economic Development Corporation with the North Metro Chamber of Commerce into the new organization, Adams County Regional Economic Partnership. We had an update on I-270 and I-25EA from CDOT. Sophie Schulman, who was the director of the Office of Innovative Mobility, came and gave us a very good presentation on the future of clean mobility, sort of a precursor to what we're hearing today on the greenhouse gas roadmap. And then Carson had been busy doing 5 tips videos, and he gave us a look at some of the videos he had been doing. All of those are on our website, Smart Commute website, and we're committed to do more for this year. In June, Julie Mullica started giving us updates. Not Julie, I think the RTD people started giving us updates on the accountability committee that was coming from the governor, of which Julie Mullica is now our local government representative. We updated the NATA Master Priorities project list with the help of all the jurisdictions. We heard about grant opportunities, particularly the Can Do Colorado Community Challenge. And then we heard about the criteria for the RTD general manager search that was going on for who ultimately became the new CEO and general manager, Deborah Johnson. Next slide. In July, it was interesting to have a presentation from Westminster about their Safer Streets Grant Project, which was Sheridan and 105th Pedestrian Safety Project, and Longmont's Can Do Colorado Community Challenge Grant, Main Street Pedestrian Safety Project. We had an update on Reimagine RTD and a Flex Ride update. And in August, Paletta Tanelis, Public Information for RTD, gave us an N-line opening activities update. And that was interesting as well, because it was the first time ever to have a line open under COVID and very, very strict social distancing. In fact, there was some talk early on that we wouldn't have any activity for that N-line opening. And RTD worked very closely with local governments and with their safety staff to make sure that we could have a very low-key opening. And then Rebecca White came and talked to us about CDOT's statewide transportation plan, the 10-year plan. And we got another RTD Accountability Committee update. In September, Front Range Passenger Rail update, Randy Grauberger, and HPTE and CDOT update on the I-25 project and funding discussion from Paul Desitis and the HPT director, Nick Farber. And then September 21st, N-line opening celebrations. In October, we had the 8th annual Transform. In December, we had a transportation legislative update. We had the new RTD General Manager, Deborah Johnson, join us and give us comments. We said goodbye to RTD Director, Judy Lubau, and we welcomed Eric Davidson. And we had the DRCOG data update, of which we've had a hand in the committee. NATA has a seat on that committee. And it was Small Area Households and Employment Forecast by Brad Calvert. Those were our presentations in 2020. Next slide, please. The focus in 2020 was updated matrix of influence and updated leave behind, that transportation connections document that we put together with the help of all the jurisdictions. We updated our master project list. We got updates on N-line construction and operations, and updates continuing on our RTD Accountability Committee meetings. We have the RTD directors reports that we initiated last year and always put them on the agenda in order to keep us in the loop on what's happening at RTD. Discussion with staff, particularly led by Brooke Swoboda, on NATA alternative approach to RTD local and regional transit service delivery, and how can we help RTD or influence RTD or all of the above in order to make sure we have adequate service delivery with our jurisdictions. We continue to work on the DRCOG NATA data subcommittee meetings. And this year we'll also be looking, as we did last year, to legislative updates. And now we're back to the agenda, and it looks like I'll hand this back over to our chair.
Thank you, Karen. I don't know how you did that all in one breath, but I don't know if you actually took a breath in there. So anybody else want to add anything to that, or questions for Karen about our accomplishments last year? I mean, really, there was a lot going on. And, you know, I think we are all very thankful that that N-line is open. I do want to say quickly, thank you to Lisa over at RTD before we get into the director comments, because she's helped us get connected with some of these updates on the N-line that are coming through, these alerts. And so people are still working. There's still some issues to work through, but I think the accomplishments of last year and where we are now, a lot actually happened. A lot was accomplished, and hopefully we can accomplish more this year. I don't see any hands up, so we'll move on to the RTD director's comments. I don't know who wants to start on that.
I think Vince's hand was raised, but Jessica, the one thing I wanted to make sure is we recognize Eric Davidson, our new board member for District I. He's, I think I saw him on the meeting along with Lynn Geisinger. So I think we got at least 4 of us, and Deborah obviously is here, and we love to hear from her. One of the things I think that would, and I'm going to put Eric on the spot, kind of frame the conversation that we're having. And it's a little lopsided, as Deborah and the other board members would attest, from our governor in regard to, the news on the Northwest Corridor situation. But I thought Tuesday night, Eric did a great job in kind of framing his position as a representative for that area, and a good point that I think morphs over into the whole north area as far as our priorities to do what we can to get this corridor done and then finish the other 3 fast tracks. So Eric, I didn't warn you, but would you share some of those comments? Because I think it was holistic and there was a lot of agreement from the rest of the board.
Yeah, sure thing. No problem, Troy. Thank you for teeing that up, and it's certainly good to see all of you here today. There are a number of things going on at RTD, and certainly I won't comment on all of those. I know we have several people on the call. One of the most critical things is bringing back some of our frontline workers and managing the new funds that we have coming in, and our CEO and general manager, Deborah Johnson, I think is doing a great job there, and I'll let some others comment on that. So certainly a lot is going on right now, and a lot of very important day-to-day things as we get past this tragic and difficult time that we've been in. But I think as many people are aware, and as Troy alluded to there, we do have quite a bit of attention going towards the Northwest Rail completion of the B line right now. And I think, actually we're taking some really great steps to really take a fresh look at this issue. And what we heard on the board meeting this past week is that our chair and our general manager and CEO have called for a special study session on February 9th. And I, for one, am certainly appreciative that we'll be having this study session. It's meant to be a deep dive to really get the board fully caught up and fully briefed on where we stand on the Northwest Rail. And I think that, some of the comments that I made this past board meeting was that I think it's important to remember that the Northwest Rail, we have to address this issue. It remains a part of RTD's plan. It was committed to by the board of directors. It remains in the NAM's plan as well. And it does involve multiple communities from Arvada to Westminster to Broomfield, Louisville, Lafayette, Boulder, Longmont. So regardless of how it gets framed or shortened in headlines, it does involve many of us. And the excessive delays for 16 years without resolution or communication have led to a lack of trust. And during our board meeting, we actually had one gentleman call in and say just that the lack of transparency is perhaps one of the more frustrating aspects of this. So in an effort to rebuild trust, we will be communicating more openly. We have a relatively new board. We have a new general manager and CEO. So the timing is right for the briefing. And something I'm excited about with the timing is we have other parties who have expressed interest in a rail project along the entire Front Range, from Front Range Passenger Rail, Southwest Chief Commission, as well as Amtrak. And something I expressed at the board meeting, and I believe many board members are aligned with, is that RTD has a responsibility to not just be a participant in those partnerships, but actually to be a leader driving those partnerships and helping them to come to fruition. So, I continue to be enthusiastic to be here despite the difficult time that we're in. This is a really collaborative place to live. We have a lot of great transit minds. And with that collaborative spirit and those great minds, we're going to find a way through this. But the first step is to get the whole board briefed, to get our new CEO and general manager briefed, all of the senior leadership together, and just start a conversation that hasn't been happening for some time. So I'll leave it there. And again, just conclude with it's great to be here. I can't believe it's only been a few weeks being on the job. There's a lot going on. But I'm just so happy to be here. I'm excited about the team that I'm on with my fellow board members. I'm excited about our CEO and general manager, who I just think is doing a fantastic job in what is a very difficult, if not the most difficult time in transit history. So thanks for having me here.
So not too bad for a first time board meeting, huh? He's doing a great job and we're thrilled that he's on board. I'm going to step aside. I know we have Lynn here that might want to talk a little bit about the accountability committee. We serve on that together, but she's really been our lead. Obviously we've got Vince and Deborah. So whoever wants to jump in there next, we're busy. We're excited about the next couple of weeks and looking at the unfinished corridors, especially the beeline. And so we're going to have a good year come hell or high water. Right, Deborah?
I guess I'll go next if that's okay. Yeah, this Northwest Corridor study, the study session we're going to have on the 9th, I invite everybody, please tune into that, because we'll be taking a deep dive into not only where we are, but how we got to where we are. And I think some of the history is important and telling in a lot of ways. And just, you all know, it's not that we don't want to build the Northwest Rail. We love building things. So hopefully we can get some collaboration and partnerships going together that will make that happen. As far as my stuff that I'm looking forward to this year, I've been appointed as the chair of the General Manager Oversight and Performance Management Committee. Remember that now, Deborah. So this is the committee that puts together the format by which we do performance appraisals for our general manager. And because they kind of go hand in hand, I'm looking forward to working with Deborah on our typical retreat process where we do our goal setting. And in the past, I've been involved in a couple of them now, and I've not been very impressed with the process. And I know Deborah is wanting to shake things up, and I am as well. So we're looking forward to setting measurable goals, outcome-based goals, and moving the agency forward in that regard. Other than that, N-Line is chugging away, and as Jessica indicated, we've got little tweaks here and there, some problems on and off with any new system. You're going to get that, but we're working on those and hopefully being open and transparent and with our communications on all that stuff as well. So other than that, I guess I'll turn it over if Director Geisinger wants to speak next.
Sure. It looks like you're still on there, but this is Lynn Geisinger, and I always learn a lot attending these meetings. Thank you. Can you hear me okay? I see Vince up there. Okay. I share all of the things that were said before. I'm going to start off by saying, having been there a couple of years now with Troy and Vince, and I think Kate Williams maybe or was on earlier. We are experiencing really a refreshing change right now. I think that Deborah has come in and meeting with Auraria and working something out on the eco passes, which have been a problem for a while. And I'm just hearing from staff, at the cities and counties and other places. And I hope you're having this experience that there's a new level of flexibility. So I really appreciate that. It makes it easier to do our job. In terms of Northwest Rail, I think Eric said it very well. I'm pushing also that RTD, let's take the steps we need to do to understand what we can do and really to start leading with the potential partnerships and see where we are. There's a lot of pieces out there with the federal infrastructure bill, which of course, this is not anywhere near ready for that, but Front Range Passenger Rail, Amtrak, there are others. It's time for us to move forward on some of those things. And I appreciate our chair and our CEO setting up the meeting to sort of kick that off on the 9th. I think the accountability committee is doing a good job. It's they've come up with 4 recommendations for legislative changes, and Julie may have been keeping you up to speed on all of that. The ones that are coming up in this legislative session are all changes to the RTD statute to give the board more flexibility around parking and fare box recovery and TOD, those sorts of things, contracting. And they put out an interim report, which is I think it's on both the RTD and DRCOG websites. if you want to look at it. There's some interesting things they're doing now. They're coming up with recommendations for how RTD might spend any extra money out of the federal stimulus or funds that are freed up from that. Most of that, of course, is going to operations and payroll. But it'll be interesting to get the accountability committee's recommendations. I know that board and staff at RTD are already working on ideas for that. So that's most of my report. Thanks for having me again. I always learn a lot when I come to these meetings.
Well, good morning, everyone, and I'm pleased to be with you this morning. And I want to say thank you to the members of the RTD board for their comments and their reports. I won't spend much time. I know there's other business to which you need to attend, but I'd be remiss in saying that I look forward to 2021. I think there are opportunities abound in relationship to Northwest Rail. Recognizing I have been in a lot of different virtual formats with many of you assembled here today. I want to reiterate my commitment to all of you to working collaboratively and cooperatively on generating ideas and a path forward. I want to assure you that is my intent, recognizing coming into this area. I said from the outset, I don't know what I don't know. And I do know that you all are committed to public transportation and want to see a viable transportation network. So please be assured that's my intent. And working in conjunction with the chair of the RTD board, Angie Rivera-Malpietti, we are hosting or holding, I should say, not hosting, because we're all going to participate collaboratively and have some in-depth discussion about what lies ahead for us as we look to remedy this situation that's been plaguing the region for 16 years. More so, I like to say that my team and I, as Director Geisinger mentioned, are working on a utilization plan as relates to the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, known as CRRSA. The intent of that legislation, of course, is to ensure that we maintain transit operations, and with any transit agency in this country, the vast majority of its operating budget is labor intensive. Hence, that's the intent of the bill text. But I want you all to know, recognizing that we shored up $140 million deficit by making some adjustments. And we are looking to carve out some other money, since we now have these stimulus funds we did not anticipate to leverage to enhance the programs and services in which we provide. So we're looking at the accountability recommendations, also recommendations that we need to address and implement as relates to our most recent state audit. So with that, I just want to say thank you. I'm glad I had the opportunity to be with you this morning and hear these comments, and look forward to having some dialogue with you, and hope that you all can join us on February 9th. So I'll yield the floor back. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for anybody? I know I saw some comments in the chat, just thanking everyone for their comments.
Jessica, if I could, I just want to say thank you for the time slot that you've given us, going back, the last 15, 18 months. It's been very helpful for us to have two-way communications and gathering your input. And I'm tickled to death to have Deborah on the call with anywhere from 2 to 4 or 5 board members at this event. So appreciate the people that I serve with. They're doing a good job. And, Vince's role with that goal setting and the general manager oversight is a big lift. It's a lot of work, but it's strategically very important. So I appreciate that, and Eric's input already as a new board member, and then Lynn's ongoing efforts with accountability committee and governance. We've got a good team. We just need time to make some more things happen. So we're looking forward to a couple of really good years. Thank you.
Thank you, Troy. I do want to say I appreciate the team that we have here from RTD that's been consistent. And I think Lynn said it is a breath of fresh air. We've got great representation up here in the North now that's really done a great job advocating for us. And Deborah, it's just really nice to hear some of your ideas and thoughts about what we can expect moving forward. And I appreciate the work that you're doing and have already gotten to do in the short time that you've been with us. So look forward to 2021 and hopefully moving the needle on some of these items. All right, I don't see any hands up anywhere, so we'll just keep moving along. So it looks like we have a presentation on Colorado Greenhouse Gas Reduction Roadmap with Rebecca White and Kay Kelly from CDOT.
Right, and I'd like to tee it up by saying I'm thrilled to have Rebecca and Kay here. Kay is now the Director of Innovative Mobility, replacing Sophie Schulman, who came and talked to us last year. And Kay comes from the Energy Office, and prior to that, worked in the private sector. And she's leading RTD CDOT through our portion of the Colorado greenhouse gas emissions reduction. As you know, transportation is the biggest emitter of greenhouse gas after the electric and coal industry, which has had a significant decline in the last year. And so this is important information. It coincides with directives from the governor, and we're really excited to have this presentation today, and thanks for letting us put it on the agenda. And I'm going to turn this over now to Rebecca and to Kay.
Thank you, Commissioner Stewart, and thank you, Chair Sandgren, for the time to talk with you folks today. I understand from Commissioner Stewart that some of you have heard about the greenhouse gas roadmap and other forums that you're part of, but really wanted to take the opportunity to discuss what the state is doing on the greenhouse gas front with this entire group. From the presentations earlier, I think you'll see some nice synergies here with a lot of the work that you're doing on the behavior change and transportation demand management front. So appreciate the time this morning. Next slide, please. I think we all know this, but Colorado is being increasingly impacted by climate change. Should go without saying that things are changing with our climate here. We're seeing droughts and floods and fires, warmer temperatures, poor air quality issues. We're having dust storms on the eastern plains that have closed down I-70. We saw the Grizzly Creek fire close I-70 in the mountain corridor through Glenwood Springs for 2 weeks this summer. So things that CDOT is concerned about and how that it impacts our infrastructure. And other concerns as well. The Denver Metro North Front Range, as we know, has been out of attainment with the National Ambient Air Quality Standards for some time now. We were just downgraded from moderate to serious, and it's likely that we're going to see a further downgrade to severe on the horizon from EPA, which is going to lead to more federal regulations being placed on our non-attainment areas. Next slide. As a state, we also know that people of color, our tribes and indigenous communities, our low-income communities are also bearing more climate burdens. These are communities who've historically lacked access to or even been intentionally excluded from the policy process. And many of these communities have been bearing these multiple environmental burdens for many decades. So as a state, we are very much committed to building equity and justice principles into our response. We're doing that through our climate equity framework, which is being led by the climate unit at the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. They're working to identify and really intentionally engage with these communities to make sure that their voices are considered and included in our decision-making process going forward. The draft, I believe, of the climate equity framework is due to be out rather soon, I think in the next month or so. Next slide. So the roadmap process kicked off in the spring of 2019 with the signing of House Bill 19-1261. That was the bill that set greenhouse gas targets for the state, targeting a 26% reduction by 2025, 50% by 2030, and 90% by 2050. And those are all compared to a 2005 baseline. And since then, there's been a multi-agency effort underway. It was led by the Colorado Energy Office. It was supported by technical modeling from Energy and Environmental Economics, or E3. But really a lot of collaboration across a lot of state agencies to get this work done. And you can go to the next slide. So here's kind of a closer look at the project timeline. We really began modeling with E3 in earnest last winter. We began public engagement work on the roadmap last spring. We've held many dozens of meetings on the topic. We had a technical advisory group. We were giving regular updates to the Air Quality Control Commission, to other state boards and commissions. We've met with sector-specific stakeholders. CDOT in particular has been talking to the MPOs, the TPRs, the TMOs, the motor carriers, the Regional Air Quality Council, a lot of folks in the transportation space talk specifically about those recommendations. We've also been meeting with business groups and local governments. And again, that climate unit at CDPHE has been doing really focused outreach with impacted communities. We've had a couple of public meetings that saw upwards of 500 people. So personally, I'm really proud of the work that we've done on the stakeholder outreach. We've easily talked to thousands of people at this point from all across the state, lots of different interests and viewpoints. All of that analysis work with E3, all the public engagement work culminated in us issuing the public comment draft of the roadmap on September 30th. We had a feedback, another kind of feedback period after that. And then starting in November, we took all that feedback into consideration, made a bunch of edits, and issued our final report just a couple weeks ago. So next slide gets really into the roadmap details. This chart really gives us that sector by sector look at where Colorado's emissions have traditionally been coming from. So 2005 at the top, you see the list, and 2020 at the bottom. 4 major contributors are on both lists, but electric used to be number 1. But again, as Commissioner Stewart mentioned at the beginning, is they've been really transitioning away from coal and toward more renewable sources of energy, something that you've likely heard about through a lot of the voluntary coal plant early retirement announcements that have been coming. Transportation has really emerged as that largest source of emissions that we need to tackle. And with the electric sector really poised to continue shrinking and move further down on that list, transportation is really that next big opportunity area for us to make some improvements. Next slide, please. So as part of the roadmap, we built 3 scenarios to illustrate our trajectory. The top blue line is our reference scenario. That's kind of business as usual. The next line down, the gold line, is the 2019 action scenario, which shows kind of all those voluntary utility commitments. And then it forecasts out the long-term impacts of those, plus some of the legislation that passed in the 2019 session. The final solid line, the red one, is our House Bill 1261 target scenario. This is really what it would take across all sectors of the economy to actually meet those circles, the targets on the graph. And then you'll notice there's a couple of dotted lines as well. Those last 2 scenarios, we did a further COVID sensitivity analysis on those based on some of the variables that we were seeing emerge as part of the COVID pandemic that we felt were likely to impact our trajectories. So, those scenarios were produced last summer as well. But I think really what this shows is, as a result of the state's actions to date, that kind of 2019 action scenario, we're on this trajectory to achieving about half of the level of emissions reductions that we need to meet the 2025 and 2030 goals. And those projected impacts of COVID do take us a little closer to those targets if our crystal ball on COVID impacts that we projected last summer was accurate. But really what it also shows us is there's a lot of work that we need to do to really close that gap between the yellow and red lines, especially looking out to that 2050. And there's still a lot that needs to be done to meet that target. So how are we going to do that is the next slide. This is looking at that same data on a slightly different chart. So the kind of top line on this chart is the reference case. The bottom line is the House Bill 1261 target. And all these colored lines, colored wedges that are stacked together are all the different strategies that we can use to close that gap. And as you can see, there's really no single magic bullet solution that would get us all the way there. If it was that easy, someone would have already done it. But clean electricity and oil and gas have potential for some really big reductions in the near term. You can see those big blue and brown wedges and boxes. But there's a lot of other sectors of the economy and other actions that we need to take as well. Next slide. This is another look at the same data. And this chart actually goes all the way out to 2050 and really highlights the magnitude of emissions reductions we need in each sector. You'll notice through 2030, this is similar to what we saw on the last graph. This is largely about electricity and oil and gas. Those wedges shrink really quickly on the left half of the graph. But past 2030, all the colored wedges are going to need to see pretty significant reductions. We're thinking about a 96% reduction in transportation, 100% reduction in buildings. We know this is very ambitious. We understand this is going to require a high level of collaboration, lots of innovation. But this is the roadmap that we have laid out for how we think we can actually achieve those targets. Next slide. So the roadmap document does cover all sectors of the economy. There's sections on natural and working lands, there's sections on oil and gas. What we're really going to focus on today is the transportation recommendations. So this is the list of near-term actions that the state and all of the stakeholder feedback indicates that we should be working toward. So I grouped them. We're going to talk about them in more detail on the coming slides, but I grouped them into a few categories because really from the transportation side, we see this list as being largely about, first meaningfully accounting for emissions in our planning efforts, strategies for implementing greenhouse gas pollution standards, indirect source standards. The second area is really taking steps to change behaviors such that we're not driving single occupant vehicles everywhere, that we're bringing down VMT with TDM strategies, with smart land use, that we're increasing opportunities for public transportation. And then finally, shifting our transportation energy sources away from the fossil sources that we've traditionally used and toward the much cleaner electric grid that's emerging. And then of course, finding ways to fund that transition. So with that, we can start digging into the individual strategies. The first one on the list is indirect source standards. This is one that would be more in the Department of Public Health and Environment's court to enact. So indirect sources, if you're not familiar with this, are defined by the Clean Air Act as sources that generate or attract motor vehicle activity. So the buildings themselves aren't generating much in terms of emissions, but they attract a lot of vehicle traffic. So places like shopping malls, or office buildings, or warehouses, or industrial sites. And implementing this type of regulation is a way that we can address the large attractors in the mobile sources in addition to those mobile sources themselves. And it's also a way that we can help encourage more sustainable, multimodal, transit-oriented development as opposed to places that just attract a lot of vehicles. Next slide. So this is our greenhouse gas pollution standards. So the statewide transportation plan, the regional transportation plans, the statewide transportation plans, these are all really key documents that establish funding priorities for future years, for future decades, but they're not currently factoring emissions, greenhouse gas emissions into them. And so what we're talking about here is establishing a greenhouse gas budget system that would more accurately reflect the trade-offs between projects and really let planners and decision makers in the public evaluate them accordingly. So this project is currently under development. The specifics are going to be fleshed out through pretty close collaboration between the Department of Public Health and CDOT, an advisory group that we've established with some of the major stakeholders. So that is one of the things that's on our near-term list. And next up are the behavior change topics. The first here is transportation demand management, which I know this group is very familiar with, but of particular interest on this slide, I think, is the recommendation that we're continuing to emphasize teleworking, especially in light of what we've seen as the realm of the possible during COVID. I think we had recommended at this time last year that we move 60% of our workforce to telecommuting. People would have called us crazy, but we managed to do it. And I think there are a lot of employers that are going to be able to sustain really high levels of teleworking into the future. Also, there's a recommendation here for a trip reduction requirement for large employers. This is something that's been under discussion for some time. I know many of you I see on the meeting are part of the working group that RAC established on this topic because it does relate both to ozone and to greenhouse gases. So we do anticipate seeing something on employer TDM as part of the transportation rulemakings at the Air Quality Control Commission next summer, and also in conjunction with the serious SIP for ozone non-attainment as well. Next slide. So land use is another consideration. We know that planning decisions made at the local and regional levels have significant impacts on BMT, and we need to be thinking about designing and building communities that allow for and actually encourage the use of biking and walking and active transit, traditional transit, other kind of low carbon modes of transportation that we know are going to decrease emissions. So the state is thinking about ways that we can incentivize local governments to make land use decisions that are going to put housing near jobs. They're going to put some of those major trip destinations like grocery stores and schools close to where people live, close to high capacity public transit that can get people to and from those areas. We know that this tends to be a sensitive issue with local control. It's going to require a lot of stakeholder work with local governments and MPOs to develop the solutions that we think we need in this area. So we are anticipating undertaking a study and a stakeholder process here. Again, we anticipate those to be really lively, spirited conversations, but something that we're very much committed to having because we know that these land use strategies are important, and importantly, they can have a very beneficial multiplier effect on other things that we're doing as well. The next recommendations around public transit, really, how can we set the stage for longer term public infrastructure projects like Front Range Rail, things that address VMT. So again, this is largely about behavior change, making it safe and convenient and desirable for us to use a transportation method that isn't a single occupant vehicle. So this is something that's really going to require incorporating these elements into our future transportation funding packages, prioritizing multimodal options in programming our existing revenue streams. So the governor's budget request for 2022 does include quite a bit of money for CDOT's Safer Main Streets and Revitalizing Main Streets efforts, which are very much kind of in this vein of encouraging safe and multimodal options for downtowns and main streets. So that's the behavior change topics. And then the final strategies are around electrification of the vehicle fleet. Again, as the grid gets cleaner, let's take advantage of all that clean electricity. Let's use it as a transportation fuel. Passenger vehicles are part of this equation as well as freight. The state did announce in July that we're developing a Colorado Clean Truck Strategy. So we've been working with motor carriers. We've held some public meetings on the topic. We know that this is not a one size fits all segment. When we talk about medium and heavy duty vehicles, we're talking about dozens of different kinds of vehicles with jobs to do. So we think that the strategy is going to be really multi-layered and include a lot of different elements, including, how do we turn over some of our older vehicles? How do we establish charging infrastructure? How can we encourage fleets to be part of some of these programs that are out there like DERA and SmartWay? How can we provide charging grants to make sure that infrastructure is getting built out, whatever that is, whatever that looks like for a particular fleet. We're also doing a statewide medium and heavy duty technical analysis to investigate whether it makes sense for Colorado to adopt the advanced clean truck standards. We've been having some really great conversations with stakeholders on this, but the analysis work is really important to pair with those conversations to really understand where our best opportunities are. So we expect that process to wrap up this summer and have some more conversations with stakeholders and likely consider if we do decide to adopt advanced clean trucks based on the data and the conversations, that would likely happen more like calendar year 2022. And then of course, the state needs to lead by example and purchase these vehicles for our own state fleet as well. Finally, funding. This is key. We know we're going to need public investment to support electrification. This is going to include vehicle purchases as well as infrastructure. light duty, medium duty, heavy duty. We know that this level of funding isn't currently available through the state general fund, and we really need to figure out how to address this either through a standalone clean transportation measure as part of the transportation funding package. This was something that was under discussion during the 2020 legislative session and is already a very active discussion in the 2021 session. So more to come on that. Next slide. All right, so those are the transportation recommendations. From here, I'm going to hand it over to Rebecca, who's going to talk more about kind of where we go from here and the implementation from the CDOT perspective.
All right, thank you, Kay. Good morning, everyone. So, I think Kay did a really great job of showing that not only do we have the roadmap out, but there is a lot of work already underway. But I just want to touch on here a few pieces that are sort of specific to the regulatory space, because that's also a key outcome is how the recommendations from the roadmap sort of start to materialize in policy and legislation. So there's a couple really specific pieces that are going to move through the regulatory process, specifically with the Air Quality Control Commission. And actually, if you move to the next slide. So the AQCC has put on their docket a transportation rule that will be developed this year, with actually a draft in May and a final in August. And right now that rule is looking at addressing two of the key recommendations coming out of the roadmap. One is this greenhouse gas pollution standard. Kay covered this earlier, but the idea here is we would place a budget on our transportation plans. Right now we're looking at how that could be done at both the state and regional level. This is a concept very similar to how ozone is treated. And it sort of makes greenhouse gases something we'd look at as closely as we do the other pollutants we're really worried about, ozone and particulate matter and nitrous oxides. So that would be part of the rule. And the second piece would be this large employer trip reduction. Kay mentioned that if we move to severe non-attainment status for ozone in Colorado, this would be actually a sort of mandatory step we'd have to take. So the thought here is, because of the co-benefits with greenhouse gases and all the work that we already have done in Colorado to kind of move in this direction, that this should be part of the greenhouse gas rulemaking as well. We're at the very early stages of this. CDOT is convening an outreach process around this I'll touch on in a second. But another piece is we feel like from a policy perspective with the department, because there's quite a bit of detail, particularly for that greenhouse gas pollution standard, to implement that, and we'd be one of only a handful of states in the nation to take this on, that will really need to flush out some additional information from via a policy directive. If you go to the next slide. So the outreach, we're pretty proud of the work we did to build the 10-year plan. And again, thanks to NATA for the support you've given to that effort and letting CDOT come periodically and give updates. That was really based on quite the ground game. And we'd like to do that again as we talk about this rulemaking. Of course, the big difference is where the game has changed. With COVID, our usual way of getting in the car and driving across the state to connect with folks is no longer an option. But that's not going to stop us. We'll have a series of regional discussions around the state. We'll do those virtually, and in some ways it's a bit easier. And we'll be kicking those off over the next month. And our thought there is, this is a complicated topic. It's an exciting one. It takes a while to kind of walk through it. So we are hoping to have these small local discussions that allow folks to really open up. And then it takes a village to do this work. So we're partnering with CDPG and CEO, particularly on some of the broader outreach. In fact, CDPG is hosting its first public meeting on this topic tonight. And we've got the Zoom link there. CDPG will largely be leading the discussions around the equity considerations. as Kay mentioned, that's a really important focus of all our work in the climate space, is to understand and kind of lean into and hear from the communities that are most impacted by climate change, and in some cases most impacted by the decisions we make about it. So I think that brings us to the end. And I don't, Chair Sandgren, I don't know how, if we've screwed up your agenda today, but happy to take any questions.
I think this was a really good presentation, and let's see if there's any questions. If anyone wants to raise your hand or just jump in. I don't see any hands up. Are we all awake today? So I really think this is a great presentation, especially before we discuss our 2021 goals, because this has been a topic, I think, Kay, you said it well, that the analysis work is really important, trying to figure out where our gaps and opportunities lie. And I think this is something that we've all discussed as a NATA group. You know, what are the gaps that we're dealing with? When we talk about land use and future land use, you know, we can talk about transit-oriented development all day long, but if we're not going to have transit available, it doesn't really help us. And so I think this is a good discussion, and I'm sure there will be a lot more around it as we move forward.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you both for the information.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so our last item on the agenda, we've got about 22 minutes left, is just the discussion around our 2021 goals and our NATA retreat. And so I don't know if we have, there we go.
I'll interject here, Chair, just for a moment. As we looked at what our 2021 focus was, a lot of stuff rolled over from last year, you know, continuing to work with RTD, making sure that if we need a project list update, we can do that, any kinds of updates to any of the work we're doing. But the one that really stood out to us was Commissioner Odrizo's request last year to do some videos that explained how transportation worked. And the complexity of transportation means it's going to be more than one video. So we put that on the top of the list. It would be a work in progress for us. We're going to tap into people who know so much about transportation process and get our arms around what the content will be, and then we'll start putting together some hopefully easier to understand segments of how the complex realm of transportation, from idea to implementation, funding, planning, all of that works. So then we left these other bullets for the discussion to fill in. And we had talked last year about maybe doing a retreat this year. Just wanted to throw those out to you and give you a place to start as you discuss what we think, what you think, and what we should be doing in 2021 as NATA to keep our relevance, to make sure that we are influencing where we need to, that we're on top of issues as they come up, and that we look at the goals always of advocacy for investment in transit, rail, and transportation improvements. Turn it back over to you.
Thank you. So I think that opens it up for actually the next piece, which we did discuss a little bit at the SPC, which is a retreat. And so, Anita, you had brought up some good points about having a retreat. I think if we're going to discuss what we looked at last year, you know, with looking at a contractor to try to figure out what our gaps and opportunities might be, the retreat probably is the best place to have that conversation, so we can focus in on what we might be willing to contribute and ask our council members to agree to contribute. So I don't know if Anita, you wanted to touch on what you discussed last week at the SPC with the retreat, or anybody else?
I'd be happy to, just really briefly. While I recognize that we had a really great retreat, and I was only able actually to attend a portion of it in 2020, Um, a lot has changed. The landscape beneath us in regards to transportation has changed significantly. So there's new opportunities. There's new threats. There's new things going on that I think it would make sense to discuss. And then for another benefit of it is just that cohesion and momentum, having us all together, reminding us of the goals that we landed on in 2020. Make sure that we're speaking with one voice, that we have buy-in and momentum as an organization. So I thought a mini retreat was still worthwhile.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else want to add to that was in the meeting last week, or anybody that wasn't in the meeting? What are your thoughts about having a retreat again this year to sort of review and renew our goals?
Jessica, this is Julie. I also feel like a retreat could be helpful, just honestly to refocus. One of the things I've been feeling a lot so far this year is just really just out of focus from almost every aspect of my life, it seems like, because COVID hit and everything just scattered. And so I'd really like to just get a refocus for this group, and as Anita was saying, re-energize the group to meet our goals.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. So I think we've all been feeling that disconnect, and it will help us to just start off the year with that refocus and discussion on what we want to do. Anybody else?
This is Malcolm. I agree. The retreat we had last year was really helpful for me as a new member coming on, and I think it'd be great, even though we may not be able to do it in person. I think having an informal session, even virtual, it could be really, really helpful in focusing our goals, making sure everybody's working on the same activities. So I strongly support it. Thanks.
Thank you, Malcolm.
Hi, this is Joan. I agree with everything that's been said, and I will definitely miss the in-person retreat, because even though we've been on NATA for a while, it's always very important to have a one-on-one with the new members to welcome them. So even though it is going to be virtual, we definitely should have one. So
thank you, Joan. And luckily, like you said, Joan, we're not really new, and even some of the new members that are in this board are not new to transportation issues, especially up in the north. So I think it'll be a good discussion that will just energize us back to what we want to be working on this year. So Karen, I don't know if you can just work on dates, or if you had an idea in mind.
Thank you, Chair. We wanted to leave it up to you. The one we did last year was a Saturday. I know that's difficult for people. We could always do it in lieu of a NATA meeting on the last Thursday of the month, or we could choose another date by polling everybody and asking them what's open. All of you at NATA have multiple commitments throughout the month that are standing commitments. And so to try and find a date might be difficult. We could poll whether anybody would be interested in a Saturday. That was such a great meeting because most people could stay the whole time. A few people had to leave because they had some commitments. But the thing with these Zoom meetings are people can come in and come out as they need to without disrupting the conversation or the presentation. And so we can do whatever works for this group. Just let us know.
I think a poll would be good on that. Like you said, the Zoom meetings are so much easier. Even if you're driving, you can listen in. So maybe have a poll with a regular NATA meeting as an option and a Saturday. Okay, so we'll figure that out with the retreat, and then any goals that anybody wanted to add this year or anything to bring up at the retreat that we haven't already discussed, or I mean, we can wait until the retreat to focus in on that more. Looks like Joan has her hand up.
Thank you, Jessica. Yes, this might be something to bring up at the next meeting, but we should discuss and keep it on our radar. The BRT discussion on 470. I am not sure that we actually need to have complete BRT, as the third lane that is now used for vehicle travel was used as a managed lane. And perhaps we can go back to that rather than, I think that's a discussion that would be worth having informally, especially to see people's thoughts on that.
So just adding it to the retreat agenda to see where we're at on it.
Sure, that would be great.
Okay.
And I can get more information. That's just a very brief introduction.
Perfect.
I'm sorry, could I get some clarification on that? I'm sorry, Joan, I didn't understand. You're talking about BRT on 470?
No, I'm sorry, on I-25 from 470, from that, at where 470 comes into I-25. Let me get you more information. I'm not stating it correctly, but.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, and I'm kind of having a hard time figuring out where that might be. Okay.
Thanks.
Are you talking about the north area where we added the managed lanes up north, past up to highway, well, before Highway 7? She's shaking her head, yes.
If you don't mind, I can add some more information to that. This is Phil Greenwald from Longmont as well. Myron Hora, I don't know if he's on the call today, but worked on the project that was to increase I-25 from 2 to 3 lanes in each direction between basically where Councilmember Peck was talking about, from E470 north to State Highway 66. And the original intent of that was to really have that third lane be eventually a managed lane. And so now we're going to have managed lanes. We have the managed lanes project that goes all the way up to basically up to E470 from Denver, basically from North Denver. And then this middle section, and then we have the portion that's being built north of 66 up to Fort Collins, which is going to be a managed lane. So this is really kind of the fill the gap or bridge the gap kind of project, to have managed lanes be continuous all the way up. It's just, I think what Councilmember Peck was alluding to was there's not good use of that capacity. And I think Myron brought that to our attention many times at NATA, that this project was really meant to be a managed lane project the whole time, but it became a general purpose lane, and now it's not being used efficiently. So I think that's what we're talking about, is trying to bridge this gap between the two managed lanes, north and south.
Okay, so I get you now. It's segment, I'm sorry, I think in segments, segment 4 and 5, which would attach to segment 3 and then segment 6. And we could have HPTE come in and talk about that, or get some background from them. There's an opportunity coming up for a TIFIA loan that might make some improvements on I-25. These may or may not be included in that TIFIA loan. I know part of that TIFIA loan is to complete segments 6, 7, and 8. But that has always been on CDOT's radar, to do that, to make those continuous managed lanes and accommodate transit as well, and as part of the managed lanes master plan. But we could certainly have a presentation on that. And I think the constraint, Phil and Joan, Councilmember Peck, it is the money, the funding, right? And CDOT and HB would love to have those managed lanes, because that toll revenue fills it filters into the system that then in fact can be used to help us make more improvements on the system. So certainly it's in CDOT and HPT's best interest to be able to use those managed lanes for the purpose of extending that whole system. But I think right now it's a constraint with lack of funding. So I'm happy to, if we put this onto the agenda, I'm happy to get more information about this. So we can talk about how do we advocate for that and, you know, try to make sure that those aren't lost. So thanks. I've got you now, Joan. For some reason or other, I was thinking east on 470.
And
Well,
just to be,
Yeah.
and just to be clear, we're talking about lane conversion, not lane addition.
right.
Okay, thank
Exactly. Yep.
Thank you, Karen.
Karen, it might be helpful too to have, I think that we saw a map of just the smart commute in the NATA, I guess NATA territory, but also on there maybe the segments just so we can have a visual. So we're all speaking the same language, I guess. Any other thoughts from any of the other members about items on the retreat? And I can only see 4 people at a time on the screen. So if you have a hand up, I can't see you. If you can use your little reaction guy at the bottom to put your hand up, that would be helpful.
This is Malcolm. Maybe additional suggestions, we can just get those to Karen or Tammy and they can add it and we can figure out if there's enough time for all those.
Sounds good. Thanks, Malcolm. And I do see Jeremy on here from Perlmutter's office. I always appreciate him being on these calls because when we talk about funding, we know that we're going to need a partnership with that at that level of government. So I appreciate him being on here and hopefully we'll get somebody from Senator Hickenlooper's office to join us as well. Well, I'm not seeing any other hands up. Karen, I think if anybody has ideas, maybe they could just shoot an email to you and we can add it to the agenda. And then hopefully we'll see a poll soon to figure out when we can get that retreat on the calendar.
Yes, we'll do that and we'll work with you and the executive committee to look for some dates and put a draft agenda together. If you're okay with this, we'll pull the NATA retreat from last year and see what we can update and what's pertinent. For example, talking about the segment map, you know, that was part of our NATA retreat last year, and we can do an update to that and show the areas that have been done and what's left to do on that, and maybe get some idea of what the cost to do some of those improvements on the whole segment map will be. Maybe we can do some, instead of having somebody present, maybe we can just do some information slides that are helpful for the discussion.
Yeah, that sounds good. All right, and then for next year, it looks like we have some presentation ideas.
So these were just things that we were brainstorming on after SPC, our crew was talking about it. RTD has reached out to the Citizens Advisory Committee about some of their updated safety policies and procedures, and have a presentation that they've given to the RTD Citizens Advisory Committee that Catherine on our staff suggested might be a very good presentation for NATA. Another one that we've all talked about is the inline special fare will go away March 26th, I think. And what we have called the arbitrary fare zone that changes local to regional fares. We thought a discussion about that might be in order. It's not quite arbitrary. It's a map that a circle was drawn and then a certain range beyond that. But as you know, the G line is all under local fare and the N line is under local fare until you get to 1/12, and then it's regional fare and substantially more. So $3 local and $5.25 regional for the N line. So we thought maybe putting something like that as a presentation, probably not right away, but maybe for March. And then Colorado 7 development plan. There's a Colorado 7 meeting, coalition meeting tomorrow that will get a chance, the participants will get a chance to look at the Colorado 7 development plan. As you remember, this is some money that came through DRCOG to look at what Colorado 7 could look like from Boulder to Brighton. And we think maybe March or April is a good time to have the consultants and CDOT come in and talk about that a little bit. Anything else you want, let us know.
I think this is a good start for the year, but I also wonder about that fare zone going away in March. Maybe we could have an update from RTD next month on that, because I think that's going to start to be a really heated topic. North Glen's only stop on the N line would be a regional fare, and then the furthest current end right now would be the regional fare. So, you know, those stops aren't that far away from each other, but you know, that's going to put a lot of pressure on the 104th station, which would be the last stop for a local fare. So I would like to hear an update on that, what the conversation is at RTD for sure next month before it ends.
Okay, we'll put that on the agenda. And Deborah has put in here, Deborah Bass put in here, fair and fair equity is a major focus of the RTD Accountability Committee. And then Commissioner Odoricio says fair should be fair. That's a good one. And it's true.
Well, it's right at just before 9 o'clock. So I think we've got it all in there. Thank you everybody for being here this morning. And Karen, thanks for putting all this together. And I look forward to our next meeting as we get this year kicked off. Thanks, Julie.
Thanks for your great leadership. And you did a great job, and always a pleasure to serve you guys. What a great organization. I think you heard that from a lot of people today. So keep up the good work, NATA.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, Jessica.